The moon is a harsh mistress. You know who else is a harsh mistress? My mom! When it comes to the big three of science fiction, I'll admit Robert A. Heinlein is the one whose works have been the hardest for me to get into. In general, I've liked the stuff I've read by Isaac Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke. My thoughts on Heinlein are a bit more complex. Just so you know, this video is primarily going to be about The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, which I got done reading a few weeks ago, but toward the end, I'll also touch on Starship Troopers and Stranger in a Strange Land. You might be wondering why I read The Moon is a Harsh Mistress if I wasn't already a fan of Heinlein. Well, I'm a sci-fi fan, and I want to be familiar with the classics. Heinlein has faded a bit, but when you hear older sci-fi fans and writers talk about Heinlein, you can sense the reverence they had for him. Samuel R. Delany, for instance, said that modern critics attempting to wrestle with Heinlein's influence find themselves dealing with an object rather like the sky or an ocean. And I've seen older readers recommend his young adult novels to people who are trying to get into science fiction. So it was inevitable that I'd at least give The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, one of his major novels, a try. It was first published in 1969, and for it, Heinlein won his fourth and last Hugo Award for Best Novel. Back when the award actually mattered, if you'll excuse a tangent, I read a recent winner, Some Desperate Glory by Emily Tesh, and man, it was not good. I am kicking myself for not taking notes when I was reading that book because a review of it could have been fun. But anyway, back to The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. The book takes place in the 2070s. Multiple colonies have long been established on the moon, from which the Earth is draining resources without giving back enough in return. The main characters, Manuel Garcia O'Kelly, Wyoming Knott, and Professor Bernardo de la Paz, realize that it'll be necessary to fight for lunar independence. The Earth has warships and nuclear weapons, but the lunar colonists have on their side Mycroft, or Mike for short, a supercomputer that has somehow gained sentience. Sounds like a cool premise, but I struggled with this book. Take a look at this reading progress chart. I usually save these for the end of my videos, but I'm showing it here because it speaks for itself. More than a month on a book that's about 300 pages long. I had to force myself through it. Whenever I put the book down, I was never really looking forward to picking it back up. I was usually more inclined to make YouTube videos. I'd say my main problem with The Moon is a Harsh Mistress is that I just couldn't get emotionally invested in the revolution. The main characters start the revolution out of economic necessity, dire economic necessity. In the first part of the book, Mike calculates that in 7 years, there will be food riots on the moon as a result of its current arrangements with Earth. Cannibalism will likely start not long after. But, as strange as this might sound, even that's not quite enough for me. You see, the viewpoint character, Manny, has a fairly decent life, and he's drawn into the revolution by the other major characters, not for his own reasons. I would have liked if he had had a more personal stake in the success of the revolution. Something beyond wanting to ward off a threat to his society. I'm thinking of Braveheart. William Wallace isn't just fighting for Scotland, he's fighting for himself. He's avenging his wife, who was executed by the British. That's the sort of thing I need to really get into this kind of story. Also, I don't really hate the Authority, the organization that oversees Luna City. They're not evil, they're mainly just indifferent to the lunar colonists, and they're sort of incompetent. There's one part that sort of disturbed me at first. So, at the end of the first section, the revolutionaries take control of Luna City from the Warden, the highest representative of the authority in the city. The takeover involves cutting off the oxygen in the Warden's residence, and this leaves him in a vegetative state. And I was just like, geez, Heinlein, you didn't make me hate that guy enough for me to be cool with that. In fact, not long before that, Manny even says trouble with the warden was that he was not a bad egg. Nothing to hate about him other than fact he was symbol of authority. Another thing is, I don't think Heinlein does enough to show that a revolution was absolutely necessary. I mean, could the lunar colonists have gotten anywhere by simply negotiating with the authority? They have calculations showing how bad things will get in less than a decade. And because lunar exports of food are necessary to Earth, maybe the authority would have been willing to grant them some concessions. But they don't even bother to try that route. I get the feeling that the threat of starvation was sort of extraneous for Heinlein. I think he thought we'd root for the rebellion against the authority because it's a rebellion against an authority. For him, the fun was in writing about a smaller society that values free markets fighting against a larger and more powerful one that doesn't. I don't think he thought any further justification was truly necessary, and maybe for some other readers it isn't, but it is for me. Look, I'm a simple man. If an author gives me a character with a strong personal motivation, I'll follow them anywhere. I got through Moby Dick because Captain Ahab has a simple but powerful motivation. He's pissed off at a whale that bit his leg off and he wants to kill it. Anyone can imagine themselves in that position. So that's why I was emotionally distant from The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. But even though I had trouble connecting with it on an emotional level, I still want to give credit where it's due. It's ambitious, and I think Heinlein put a lot of thought into the world building. One reason I wasn't a fan of Stranger in a Strange Land was I thought it was sort of unimaginative. To be fair, the Martians in that book are pretty alien, but America in that book, which takes place well in the future, is culturally the same as it was when the book was written. You'd think a society would change as technology advances. Also, all the countries of the world are under one government. Another reason why it's a bit strange how the book's characters act and talk like late 50s and early 60s Americans. I thought The Moon is a Harsh Mistress was more creative. Luna City seemed to have been carefully constructed. Heinlein put a lot of thought into the way its inhabitants live, work, and speak. I liked how their culture seemed like it developed logically given the physical constraints they deal with. As Prof says, a society adapts to fact, or doesn't survive. Loonies adapted to harsh facts, or failed and died. Due to their limited resources and the extra care they take to ensure they stay alive, they've adopted a philosophy expressed by the slogan Tanstoffel. There ain't no such thing as a free lunch. I can't believe it's taken me this long to mention it. It essentially means you get what you pay for. I was particularly impressed by Manny's narration. His way of speaking and the slang he uses didn't seem artificial to me. It really did feel like speech that was influenced by a combination of the various cultures that sent people to the moon. Russian words are prominent, maybe because Heinlein expected the Soviet Union to keep pursuing space exploration well after the time during which he wrote the book. Also, I talked earlier about one of the things the revolutionaries do that I thought was a bit unsettling. After thinking about it for a bit, though, I could sort of respect that Heinlein made the heroes morally ambiguous. They're willing to lie, cheat, steal, and do all sorts of other questionable things to win. And I guess that's how these things go in real life. Revolutions tend not to be all sunshine and rainbows. And I thought some of the things Heinlein did with Mike were pretty smart. He demonstrates pretty well the strengths and limitations of computers. There's one scene where he has to look out for military ships coming from Earth, but he can't use radar because that'll give away the positions of the instruments. And Manuel suggests using video instead. And Mike, who's able to calculate the trajectories of missiles with pinpoint accuracy and calculate the chances of the success of the revolution given tons of different variables, admits that that never occurred to him. One thing Mike does that I thought was particularly foresighted was his creating of an alternate persona named Adam Saline. He creates fake videos of this persona to convince the lunar colonists to rebel. So not only did Heinlein anticipate what we'd call deep fakes today, he also imagined them being used for political purposes. Really, the relationship between Manny and Mike was one of the best things about the novel, and I couldn't help but wish these characters were in a story I could care about. Actually, even though I wasn't emotionally invested in the main conflict, Mike's fate at the end of the book did move me. Wyo and Professor De La Paz were all right too. I was kind of relieved that the prof wasn't another Jubal Harshaw. Man, another problem I had with Stranger in a Strange Land was that it felt like Heinlein created Jubal Harshaw out of sheer wish fulfillment. To be fair, I think we'd all like to be a rich and famous doctor slash lawyer slash fiction writer with three hot secretaries. Before I wrap up this review, I thought I'd talk a teeny bit about Starship Troopers. I read it more than a decade ago, and I'm not sure I'm going to reread it, so I don't think it's gonna get its own video. I remember thinking it was good. I think anyone can pick it up and have a good time with it, even if you don't agree with Heinlein's views. I don't think he was advocating for everything in that book, like full citizenship only being granted to people who join the military or serve the government in some way. He was just exploring the implications of enacting such laws. And I guess I might as well say what I think about the movie. This might be the most controversial thing I say in this video, but I thought Starship Troopers, the movie, was good. I saw it once and liked it, but I don't feel a strong need to see it again. Of Paul Verhoeven's three sci-fi movies, it's my least favorite. Total Recall's my favorite, although I'll admit, and I'm sure this is something we can all agree on, RoboCop is the best if we're trying to be objective. On to the recommendation and the star rating. In spite of the positives, I'm gonna have to say that I don't recommend The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. And I'll give it 2 out of 5 stars. I almost wanted to give it 1 star just because of how I had to force myself to read it, but there's too much to admire here. And let me just say that despite the title of this video, I don't think I'm done with this guy just yet. The key words were think and might. Actually, I'm planning to read his entire future history, a loosely connected series of short stories and novels. I'd like to hear your thoughts on The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, or any relevant feedback would be appreciated. This channel's still in its incipient stages, and I'm still trying to refine my video making process. Thanks for listening. By the way, I didn't originally intend to publish this video on the 4th of July. I started reading the book in the middle of May and thought I'd get through it and have a review out quickly. But then it took so long for me to read it, and by the time I started to write the review, I realized the 4th of July was pretty close and decided it would be appropriate to publish it then. For Americans listening, I hope you have a nice Independence Day. For those of you listening from outside of the United States, have a nice Saturday. Or I hope you had a nice Independence Day / Saturday, I should say, because most likely you'll be watching this after. Okay, bye now.